Ice crystals bit into her skin like tiny daggers as they bound her wrists to the ancient stone pillar, the wind howling across the frozen peak like the wails of the damned. Olivia Olson did not scream. She had no voice left for the pack that had abandoned her, for the man who had promised her forever then called her poison, for the family that had watched in silence as they dragged her up this mountain to die. The frozen ropes cut into her pale flesh, but the physical agony was nothing compared to the emptiness that had hollowed out her chest where hope used to live. Below, in the valley swallowed by snow and approaching night, her former pack members scattered like ghosts, desperate to escape before darkness fell. They did not look back, not even once. She was their scapegoat now, their blood offering to whatever ancient horrors prowled these cursed peaks. The Omega nobody wanted. The woman branded too weak, too damaged, too cursed to deserve survival among them. The sky above her was dying into twilight. Streaks of crimson and violet staining the clouds like fresh wounds, as if the heavens themselves bled for what was happening. Olivia closed her emerald eyes and let the killing cold seep deeper into her bones. Perhaps this was kindness. Perhaps the mountain would take her swiftly and she would finally know silence. No more blame. No more shame. No more existence. But then the wind changed direction. It carried something on its frozen breath that made every nerve in her body ignite with awareness. A scent rich and dark like ancient pine after snowfall, touched with leather and something primal that called to a part of her she had buried so deep she thought it was dead. Her wolf, silent and dormant for so long it felt like a ghost inside her, suddenly stirred within her consciousness like a creature dragging itself from hibernation. Somewhere in the darkness below something was moving. Something massive, something powerful, something that had caught her scent on the icy wind and was coming for her. The Alpha King had begun his hunt. Robin Vick stood at the base of the frozen mountain, his massive frame motionless as carved stone as he lifted his face to the bitter wind. His long dark hair whipped around his broad shoulders, and his amber eyes narrowed as he processed what his heightened senses were screaming at him. There, high above where the sacrificial pillar had stood for centuries, a scent unlike anything he had encountered in his 32 years of brutal existence. Winter roses and starlight. Terror and defiance woven together. And underneath it all, something that made his wolf snarl with possessive feral hunger. But not just any Omega. His Omega. His warriors stood behind him. Battle-hardened men who had watched him tear through enemy lines without mercy, who knew him as the king who had conquered the northern territories through blood and cunning and relentless strategy. They watched him now with confusion and growing unease as he stood frozen, his entire powerful body rigid with an intensity they had never witnessed before. "Your Majesty," his second-in-command Tobias ventured cautiously, his voice careful. The scouts reported unusual activity. A pack from the lowlands performed a sacrifice ritual at the peak. Should we investigate? Robin did not answer. He could not answer. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to move, to climb, to reach the source of that devastating scent before it was too late. His wolf was no longer under his control. It was feral with need, with recognition, with something that felt like destiny tearing its way out of his chest with claws and teeth. Without a word he shifted. Bones cracked and reformed with audible violence. His body expanded into the largest wolf any of them had ever seen. Silver-black fur that seemed to absorb light itself, eyes that glowed like molten amber, a crown of iron still somehow perched on his massive head. He was a creature of legend and nightmare made flesh. He did not wait for his men to follow. He simply ran. Welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to a story that's going to grip your heart and refuse to let go. Tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing our pack spread across the globe. And hey, how are you doing today? I genuinely want to know. Now, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss what happens next in this story. We hope you enjoy the journey. The mountain was treacherous, Jagged ice, unstable stone, deadly drops that would kill a normal wolf instantly. But he moved like liquid shadow, powerful legs devouring the distance, claws finding impossible purchase on frozen rock. The scent grew stronger with every leap, every bound upward, driving him to the edge of madness. His heart hammered against his ribs with an urgency that bordered on panic. Something was wrong. He was in danger. His mate was in danger. The word echoed through his mind like a war drum, and he knew with absolute certainty it was true. Whoever this woman was, whatever circumstances had brought her to this peak of death, she belonged to him. Fate had written it in the stars and sealed it in the scent that was driving him wild with the desperate need to reach her. Olivia heard it before she saw it. The sound of something massive moving through the darkness with supernatural speed. The scrape of claws on ice, the thunder of paws against stone, the rumble of a predator closing in on prey. Her heart, which had been so resigned to death mere moments ago, suddenly kicked into a frantic rhythm. The frozen ropes around her wrists seemed impossibly tight now, her breath coming in short, visible gasps as primal fear flooded her system. This was it. The beast that would end her. But when the creature finally emerged onto the plateau, stepping into the dying crimson light with a grace that belied its enormous size, she found she could not look away. The wolf was magnificent, terrifying and beautiful in equal measure, with silver-black fur that seemed to drink in the darkness around it, and eyes that burned with an intelligence that was painfully, impossibly human. It approached slowly, each step deliberate and measured, and she could see the way its massive chest heaved with exertion from the climb. Steam rose from its body in ghostly spirals against the frozen mountain air. When it was close enough that she could have reached out and touched it if her hands were free, it stopped. For a long, suspended moment, they simply stared at each other. Olivia felt something crack open inside her chest, something she had thought was dead forever. Hope. Recognition. A connection so profound it made her previous understanding of the word, mate, seem like a child's crude drawing of the real thing. The wolf's fierce amber eyes softened, and then it was shifting. She watched in breathless amazement as the creature transformed, bones and muscle reforming with fluid grace into the shape of a man. The most magnificent man she had ever seen. He stood before her, chest bare despite the killing cold, covered in old scars that spoke of countless battles survived, his long dark hair falling past his broad shoulders, a crown of iron somehow still resting on his head, a face all sharp angles and raw masculine beauty. He was easily over 6.5 feet tall, built like a warrior from ancient myths brought to devastating life. And when his amber eyes met her green ones, she saw both the predator and something infinitely, impossibly gentle. "You're real," he breathed, his voice rough like gravel and honey mixed together like smoke and silk. His large hands came up to the frozen ropes binding her wrists, and she noticed with shock that they were shaking slightly. This massive, powerful man was trembling as he worked to free her. "I thought I might have imagined you. Who are you?" Olivia whispered, her voice hoarse from cold and disuse and years of being told to stay silent. "Robin Vick." The ropes fell away and his hands immediately went to her wrists, his touch impossibly gentle as he examined the raw, bleeding skin there. His jaw clenched with visible fury. "Alpha King of the Northern Territories." His amber eyes lifted to lock with hers, blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. "And you are my mate." He wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was nobody's mate, that her own pack had literally tied her to a stone pillar and left her to freeze to death because she was so worthless, so cursed, so toxic that even death was too good for her. But the words died in her throat when he suddenly pulled her against his chest, wrapping his massive arms around her shaking body with devastating tenderness. He was so warm. He had been cold for so long, months, years, maybe her entire life. She had forgotten what warmth felt like, what safety felt like, what home felt like. His scent enveloped her completely, That rich pine smell mixed with leather and smoke in something uniquely, perfectly him. And her wolf finally woke up completely. The creature inside her stretched and purred and pressed against her consciousness with joy she had never felt from it before, with recognition that made her want to weep. "Mine," Robin murmured against her silver-white hair, his deep voice breaking with emotion. "You're mine now. And I will burn this entire world to ashes before I let anyone hurt you again." And for the first time in her cursed existence, Olivia Olson believed that someone might actually mean it. Robin lifted Olivia into his arms as if she weighed nothing, wrapping his thick fur cloak around her trembling body and pulling her against his bare chest. She should have protested, should have insisted she could walk, but the warmth radiating from him was intoxicating after so long in the cold. Her cheek pressed against his scarred skin, and she felt his heartbeat strong and steady, a rhythm that seemed to whisper safe, safe, safe. The descent was treacherous, but he moved with supernatural grace, never once stumbling despite the ice-slicked stone and her weight in his arms. His grip on her was possessive yet achingly gentle, as if he held something infinitely precious that might shatter if he wasn't careful. When they reached the base camp, Olivia saw warriors, at least a dozen, standing around a roaring fire. Their eyes widened at the sight of their king carrying a silver-haired woman cradled protectively against his chest. She felt their stares like physical touches and tried to make herself smaller, that old instinct to disappear screaming through her veins. "Get back," Robin growled, and they immediately retreated. He carried her to the fire and sat, keeping her in his lap, still wrapped in his warmth. A dark-haired man, Tobias she would learn, approached cautiously with supplies. "Tell me," Robin said softly, his large hand coming up to brush frost-damaged strands of hair from her face. "Tell me everything." So she did. Haltingly at first, her voice breaking on words she'd never spoken aloud. She told him about being Shadowpack's only Omega born in 20 years. About being promised to Oscar, the Beta's son, who had seemed kind until the troubles began. When crops failed and sickness spread through their territory, they needed someone to blame. And what better scapegoat than the cursed Omega? Robin's jaw clenched tighter with every word, but his hands remained impossibly gentle as they worked salve into her rope-burned wrists. She described the isolation, locked in a windowless room for months, her rations growing smaller each day until she could count her ribs through her skin. She told him about this morning, when Alpha Sebastian himself had dragged her from her cell and ordered her bound to the mountain. "My father helped tie the knots," she whispered, and felt Robin's entire body go rigid beneath her. "Their names," he said, his voice deadly soft. "I want every name." Tobias approached with a bowl of warm broth, and Olivia watched in amazement as her fierce Alpha King took it and brought the spoon to her lips himself, feeding her with infinite patience. His warriors stared openly now. They had never seen their lethal king like this, tender and careful and utterly devoted. When exhaustion finally claimed her, Robin tucked her into his own furs beside the fire, then slid in behind her, wrapping his massive body around hers protectively. His arm banded across her waist, holding her close, his heartbeat steady against her spine. "Sleep, little wolf," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." That night, when nightmares dragged her back to the mountain, to the cold, to the rope cutting into her wrists, to her father's empty eyes, Robin's deep voice pulled her back. He held her tighter, whispered promises against her temple, his presence an anchor in the darkness. For the first time in years, Olivia Olson slept without fear. The morning sun found Olivia insisting she could walk, despite Robin's clear reluctance. Her legs trembled beneath her after months of confinement, but she needed to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she wasn't completely broken. Robin stayed close enough that his shoulder brushed hers with every step, his presence a constant warmth against the lingering cold in her bones. When she stumbled on the second day, his arms were there before she hit the ground. That evening, he knelt before her without a word and examined her blistered feet with a frown that made her chest ache. His scarred hands were impossibly gentle as he applied salve and wrapped them in clean cloth, and she marveled that these same hands could kill without hesitation. She was learning his duality and it fascinated her. One moment he would pick frost lilies from the roadside and tuck them into her hair, his amber eyes soft as he shared his rations despite her protests. The next, scouts would report movement at the border and he would transform, his voice dropping to lethal coldness, his commands sharp as blades, his warriors following with equal parts devotion and fear. But whenever his gaze found her again, everything softened. The Northern Territory revealed itself gradually, and Olivia's breath caught at its beauty. Dense pine forests gave way to fertile valleys where villages clustered like jewels. This was nothing like Shadowpack's struggling lands. This was prosperity built on strength and strategy, and it showed in every thriving field, every well-maintained home. Then the fortress appeared, a massive structure of stone and timber built into the mountainside itself, imposing and beautiful in equal measure. Her steps faltered. "Breathe," Robin murmured, his hand finding hers. "They're going to love you." She wanted to believe him. But as they approached and pack members began gathering, that old fear clawed up her throat. They would see what she was, a cursed Omega, worthless, broken. They would reject her just like, "My people," Robin's voice rang out, commanding immediate silence. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her firmly against his side. "I present to you Olivia Olsen. My mate. Your future queen." Olivia braced for the scorn, the whispers, the disgust she'd lived with her entire life. Instead the pack erupted. Cheers rose like thunder. A warm-hearted woman with kind eyes, Ella she would learn, pushed through the crowd and pulled Olivia into an embrace that smelled like herbs and home. "Welcome, my dear. Welcome home." More pack members pressed forward, not with suspicion but with joy. They congratulated Robin, touched her hands gently, smiled at her with genuine warmth. A young mother thanked the moon goddess for blessing their king with a mate. An elder bowed with respect that made Olivia's throat tight. She couldn't breathe, couldn't process. This wasn't rejection. This wasn't scorn. This was acceptance. The tears came without permission, spilling hot down her cheeks. Robin pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple as his people, their people, celebrated around them. "I told you," he murmured against her hair, and she heard the smile in his voice. "You're home now, little wolf. You're finally home." Robin led Olivia through corridors of polished stone until they reached a set of ornate doors. When he pushed them open, her breath caught. The suite was magnificent, soaring ceilings carved with intricate wolf motifs, a massive bed piled high with furs that looked softer than clouds, a fireplace already crackling with warmth. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of snow-capped peaks painted gold by the setting sun. "This is ours now," Robin said, watching her take it all in. He gestured toward an adjoining room where steam curled invitingly through the doorway. "I had them prepare a bath. Healing herbs for your skin." Olivia turned to find clothing laid out on the bed, soft fabrics in deep emerald and silver, perfectly sized for her smaller frame. He'd thought of everything. The realization made her throat tight. That night, after she'd soaked until her fingers pruned and dressed in a nightgown that felt like wearing moonlight, she found Robin arranging furs on the couch. Her heart stuttered. "What are you doing?" He looked up, his amber eyes gentle. "Giving you space. The bond between us, I feel it and I know you do too. But you've been through hell, little wolf. When you're ready for more, it will be your choice. Not before." Something cracked open in her chest at his words. This powerful king, kneeling on a couch rather than claiming what fate had given him, because her comfort mattered more than his desire. The days that followed brought unexpected gifts. Ella swept into her life like a warm breeze, teaching her pack customs with patience and humor, introducing her to the other women who welcomed her without hesitation. Olivia discovered the library, a vast room filled with books and scrolls, and lost herself in Northern Territory history. She learned about Robin through those pages and whispered conversations. His parents, beloved leaders, had been killed in a brutal territorial war when he was barely 10. His uncle had raised him with harsh discipline, forging him through pain and strategy into the unbreakable king he'd needed to become. He was so young, Ella said one afternoon, her eyes distant. But he never broke. He just got stronger. Pack members sought Olivia's opinion on disputes, included her in decisions about resource distribution. A mother asked her advice about her daughter's education. The head cook requested her input on the upcoming Harvest Festival menu. They treated her not as a cursed omega to be tolerated, but as their future queen to be respected. Slowly, carefully, Olivia began to unfurl. Like a flower that had been kept in darkness finally finding sunlight, she straightened. Her voice grew steadier. Her smiles came easier. She caught herself laughing at one of Ella's stories and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed before. And through it all, Robin was there, patient, devoted, never pushing. His hand finding hers during walks. His eyes tracking her across rooms. His good-night kisses pressed to her forehead with reverent tenderness. She was beginning to understand something terrifying and beautiful. She was healing. And more dangerous still, she was falling in love. Robin courted her like she was something precious, and Olivia didn't know how to process it. He brought her frost lilies every morning after patrol, their white petals still dusted with ice, tucking them into her silver hair with hands that trembled slightly. "They reminded me of you," he'd say, his amber eyes soft. "Beautiful things that survived the harshest cold." They walked through his territory together, his much larger hand always finding hers, fingers lacing with an intimacy that made her heart stutter. He told her stories as they walked, how he'd united the formerly warring packs through equal parts strategy and mercy, how he'd learned that true strength wasn't just about domination but about knowing when to extend a hand instead of a fist. "You would have made a terrible tyrant," she teased one afternoon, and his answering laugh was rich and warm. "I tried," he admitted. "My uncle taught me that fear was the only currency worth having. It took me years to understand he was wrong." One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, Robin led her deep into the forest. Steam rose through the trees ahead, and when they emerged into a small clearing, Olivia gasped. A hot spring sat nestled among the pines, its surface rippling with heat, steam spiraling up into the star-scattered sky. "It's heated by volcanic activity beneath the earth," Robin explained, his voice low. "Few know about it. I thought you might enjoy the privacy." They undressed with their backs to each other, maintaining modesty despite the mate bond humming insistently between them. But when Olivia slipped into the water with a sigh of pure pleasure, she caught Robin's gaze tracking over her bare shoulders, saw the restraint it cost him to keep his distance. He entered from the opposite side, but the spring wasn't large. 4 feet of charged water separated them. "Tell me something no one else knows," Olivia said, needing to know all of him. Robin was quiet for a long moment, steam curling around his broad shoulders. "I'm terrified," he finally admitted, his voice rough. "That I'm too damaged for this. Too hard. Years of violence and strategy, they don't exactly prepare you for softness. For love. What if I don't know how?" Olivia moved through the water toward him, watching his eyes widen as she came closer. When she was directly in front of him, she reached out and placed her hand over his scarred chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. "You climbed a mountain for me," she said fiercely. "You've been nothing but gentle. You sleep on a couch because my comfort matters more than your desire. If that's not knowing how to love, I don't know what is." His hand came up to cover hers, pressing it more firmly against his chest. Then his other hand cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheek with devastating tenderness. "Olivia," he breathed, and then he was kissing her. He was gentle at first, testing, asking permission. But when she gasped and pressed closer, it deepened. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and she felt every hard plane of his body. Her hands explored his scars, her lips discovered his jaw, his throat, the hollow beneath his ear that made him groan. They didn't complete the bond that night. But the promise of it hung heavy and sweet between them, intoxicating as the steam that rose around their entwined bodies beneath the stars. 2 weeks into her stay, Olivia found herself curled in the library's largest chair, a book about ancient pack bonds open in her lap. The afternoon light slanted through tall windows, painting everything gold, and she was so absorbed she didn't hear him enter. "There you are." She looked up to find Robin in the doorway, fresh from a council meeting, still wearing his ceremonial crown of iron and fur. He looked every inch the king, powerful, commanding, dangerous. But when his amber eyes found hers, everything softened. He crossed to her and settled in the chair beside hers, close enough that their knees touched. "What are you reading?" "About bonds," she said softly. "How they work. What they mean." Robin was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "My parents had a bond like that. Strong enough that when my father fell in battle, my mother knew the moment his heart stopped. She died defending his body 3 minutes later." Olivia's throat tightened. "Robin." "I was 10, he continued, his voice steady but weighted. "I watched from the fortress walls. Couldn't do anything but watch. That loss, it shaped everything. Made me understand that every life under my protection matters. That being king means being willing to die so they don't have to." Then he slid from his chair to kneel before her on the fur rug, taking her smaller hands in his much larger ones. The crown sat slightly askew on his dark hair, and something about seeing this powerful king on his knees before her made her heart stutter. "Olivia." His voice broke on her name. "I need you to know, I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you. You've become my every thought, my every breath. When I wake, you're the first thing I want to see. When I sleep, you're who I dream about. You've undone me entirely." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've been falling for you since the mountain," she whispered. "Maybe even before. Maybe the moment you looked at me like I was something precious instead of cursed. Being with you feels like discovering who I was always meant to be." His hands tightened on hers. "Tell me what you want. Anything. Everything. It's yours." "You," she breathed. "I want you. I'm ready, Robin. I'm ready to complete our bond." Heat flared in his amber eyes, turning them molten. He surged to his feet and lifted her into his arms in one fluid motion, the book tumbling forgotten to the floor. He carried her from the library, and pack members they passed smiled knowingly, some offering quiet congratulations. In their quarters, he set her down beside the massive bed with a reverence that made her ache. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time. "Because once we do this—" "I'm sure," she said, reaching up to pull him down to her. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was claiming and surrendering, fierce and tender, physical and spiritual all at once. When the mate bond finally snapped into place, Olivia gasped at the overwhelming sensation. She could feel his emotions as clearly as her own. The bottomless depth of his love. His devotion. His absolute commitment to her well-being. "I feel you," she whispered, awed. "Forever," he promised against her lips. "You feel me forever now." Under the full moon, the entire Northern Territory pack gathered on a plateau that overlooked the valley like a throne above the world. Torches lined the ceremonial circle, their flames dancing in the night breeze, casting flickering shadows across the ancient pack altar at the center. Weathered stone carved with symbols of eternity and devotion worn smooth by centuries of touch. Olivia stood at the edge of the gathering in a gown of silver silk that caught the moonlight and seemed to glow from within. Ella had braided her silver-white hair with diamonds and winter sapphires that sparkled like captured stars. A crown of frost lilies, Robin's gift, rested on her head, their white petals pristine against her hair. When the drums began their primal rhythm, she started walking. The crowd parted before her, pack members reaching out to brush her hands in blessing as she passed. She saw mothers holding children, warriors standing proud, elders with tears streaming down weathered faces. They were all here to witness this, her transformation from cursed Omega to beloved queen. Then she saw Robin waiting at the altar and everything else faded. He was magnificent in ceremonial furs lined with silver, his crown of iron catching the torchlight, his long dark hair loose around his broad shoulders. But it was his eyes that captured her, those amber eyes that had looked at her on a frozen mountain peak and seen something precious instead of cursed. They never left her face as she approached, and through their bond she felt his emotions crash over her. Love, pride, possessive joy, and underneath it all, awe that she was real and his. The pack fell silent with reverence as she took her place before him. The ceremony was beautiful and primal, conducted in the old language by a white-haired elder whose voice carried across the plateau. They exchanged vows that bound them not just as mates but as partners, as equals, as two souls choosing each other across all the lifetimes to come. When the elder bound their hands together with a silver cord, Olivia felt the symbolism in her bones. Two becoming one, strength multiplied by devotion. Then came the marking. Robin's eyes asked permission one final time before he leaned down and bit her shoulder, his canines breaking skin in the ancient ritual that would mark her as his for all to see. The pain was sharp and sweet, and through their bond she felt his savage satisfaction, his wolf's triumph. When she bit him in return, marking his throat, his groan of pleasure echoed across the mountains. Their wolves rose together then, hers small but fierce, his massive and protective, and their harmonious howls split the night. The pack joined them, hundreds of voices lifting in celebration, the sound echoing across valleys and peaks like a declaration to the very stars. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn. Food and drink and music, pack members dancing and laughing and honoring their new queen. But eventually Robin pulled her close, his lips at her ear. "I need you alone," he growled, and heat flooded through their bond. He spirited her away to their quarters, and what followed was celebration of an entirely different kind, breathless and laughing and fierce and tender, completely consumed by each other until the sun rose and found them tangled together, marked and mated and utterly, perfectly whole. 6 weeks passed like a dream Olivia kept expecting to wake from. She settled into queenship with surprising ease, discovering talents she never knew she possessed. Pack members brought her their disputes, and she found she had a gift for seeing all sides, for finding solutions that honored everyone involved. She organized resource distribution for the coming winter, streamlined the harvest festival preparations, and somehow made it all look effortless. She even began combat training. Her Omega wolf was smaller than the others, but she was lightning fast and clever, using speed and strategy where she lacked raw power. The first time she managed to pin one of Robin's warriors, the training ground erupted in cheers. Robin watched from the sidelines with pride blazing in his amber eyes, and through their bond she felt his satisfaction, his love, his absolute certainty that she was extraordinary. Then Tobias brought news that made her blood go cold. "The Shadow Pack requests an audience," he said carefully. "They wish to discuss trade relations." Through their bond, Robin felt her spike of fear before she could mask it. His hand found hers immediately, squeezing gently. "Say the word and I'll deny them." Olivia took a shaky breath, then squared her shoulders. "No. I want to face them. I need to." On the appointed day, she sat beside Robin in the great hall on her own throne, equal to his, a deliberate statement of her position. She wore royal green velvet that made her eyes luminous, jewels glittering in her elaborately braided silver hair, every inch the queen she had become. When the Shadow Pack delegation was escorted in, their shock was visceral. Alpha Sebastian's face went pale. Oscar, her former betrothed who had called her cursed, actually stumbled. The cursed Omega they had abandoned to die was radiant, powerful, sitting on a throne beside the most feared king in the realm. Robin's interrogation was ice-cold, his voice cutting. "Tell me, Sebastian, is it your custom to sacrifice your own pack members?" "Your Majesty, the woman was," Sebastian stammered. "Her name is Olivia," Robin said, his dominance starting to leak into the room. "She is my mate and your queen." "That's impossible," Oscar burst out. "She's nothing. She's—" Robin's dominance exploded through the hall like a shockwave. Every wolf in the room dropped to their knees, gasping under the crushing weight of an alpha king's fury. Through their bond, Olivia felt Robin's rage, his barely leashed violence, his wolf howling for blood. But she stood, placing a calming hand on his arm, and stepped forward to address her former pack. "You're right that I was once nothing in your eyes," she said, her voice quiet but carrying. "Less than nothing. You tied me to a mountain and left me to freeze because blaming me was easier than taking responsibility for your own failures." She looked at each of them in turn. "But you were wrong. I was never your curse. I was never the cause of your troubles. You threw away something precious because you were too blind to see its value." She returned to her throne, to Robin's side. "And now I'm the queen of the most powerful pack in the north, while you come begging for scraps." "We will not be granting your alliance," Robin said, his voice deadly soft. "Consider yourselves fortunate I don't declare war for what you did to my mate. Now get out of my sight." As they fled, Olivia felt nothing watching them go. No anger. No pain. Just peace. They were ghosts, and ghosts had no power over her anymore. 6 months after their mating ceremony, Olivia woke feeling different. She couldn't quite name it. A heightened awareness, a subtle shift in her body, something fundamental that had changed overnight. Robin was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression of pure awe. Before she could ask, he reached out and placed his hand gently on her stomach. "I can smell it," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "The change in your scent. Olivia, you're pregnant." Pregnant. The word hung between them for a heartbeat, and then Robin's joy exploded like a supernova. He pulled her into his arms, laughing and kissing her face, her hair, her lips, his happiness pouring through their bond so intensely it made her gasp. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, wonder infusing every word. "You're giving me a family." He became impossibly overprotective after that, hovering constantly, growling at anyone who came within 5 feet of her, insisting she rest every hour whether she was tired or not. Tobias learned to approach cautiously when delivering reports. Ella just laughed and told Olivia to enjoy it while it lasted. Despite his ridiculousness, Olivia found it endearing. This powerful king, who commanded thousands and had conquered territories through sheer force of will, was reduced to an anxious mate fretting over whether she'd eaten enough, whether she was comfortable, whether she needed anything at all. She often caught him at night, when he thought she was sleeping, with his hand on her growing belly and his lips moving in quiet conversation with their unborn child. Through their bond she heard the promises he made, that they would always be loved, always be valued, that they would never know what it felt like to be unwanted or unloved. When labor began during a violent spring thunderstorm, Robin refused to leave her side. Lightning split the sky and thunder shook the fortress, but all Olivia could focus on was Robin's hand gripping hers, his face pale with a terror she'd never seen before. Not in battle, not facing enemies, only now when he was powerless to take her pain. "You can do this," he kept saying, his voice breaking. "You're the strongest person I know. Just breathe, my love. Breathe." When their daughter finally arrived with a piercing cry that competed with the thunder, the midwife placed her in Robin's trembling, scarred hands. He stared down at the tiny bundle, silver hair like her mother's, amber eyes like his, and tears streamed openly down his face. "Leonora," he whispered, his voice shattered with emotion. "My light. You're my light in the darkness." He brought her to Olivia, placing their daughter in her arms with such reverence, such infinite care, that Olivia's heart cracked open all over again. This fierce warrior king, undone by the tiny life they'd created together, cradling his daughter like she was made of starlight and wishes. "She's perfect," Olivia whispered, touching Leonora's impossibly small hand. "Like her mother," Robin said, kissing Olivia's forehead. Through their bond she felt everything: his overwhelming love, his fierce protectiveness, his gratitude for this miracle they'd been given. Watching him gaze at their daughter with wonder, Olivia fell in love with him all over again. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this epic tale of destiny and devotion. What moment touched your heart the most? Robin's desperate climb, Olivia's powerful confrontation with her past, or their tender journey to forever? Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it moved you. Share your favorite moment in the comments. We read every one. If you enjoyed watching the cursed Omega become a beloved queen and the warrior king learn to love, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of impossible love and second chances. Thank you for joining us on this journey from icy peak to eternal devotion. Until next time, may you find your own epic love story written in the stars.